Northern Thailand has a stillness that feels deliberate, as if the land itself chooses when to speak. The air sits heavy in the valleys, thick with mist and resin, while the mountains seem to breathe in long, patient intervals. In a small province near Chiang Rai, locals say there's a monastery hidden beyond the main road, past the ridges where the fog never lifts. They don't call it sacred, they call it tired, according to old stories. The monks there perform a ceremony every full moon not to summon blessings or heal the sick, but to keep something asleep. The ritual, they say, is not meant for outsiders. It is maintenance, not devotion. When the wind carries chanting down from those hills, even the dogs go quiet. That kind of story should have stayed in whispers, but it found its way to Aron Che Yafin, a Bangkok filmmaker known for his documentaries that blurred faith and cynicism. Aron had built a reputation exposing what he called folklore engineering. He'd filmed spirit healers, fake relic vendors, and monks who performed miracles for tourists. He prided himself on peeling away myth to reveal human greed underneath. But what drew him north this time wasn't money, it was something more personal. 2 months earlier, while filming in Nan Province, a retired abbot had mentioned Wat Phra Anarat, a temple so old that no map still carried its name. The monks there, the abbot said, don't worship. They negotiate. Arun had laughed then, but the phrase wouldn't leave his head. Negotiate with what? When he later searched the temple's name, nothing came up. No records, no photos, no coordinates. Until one night, an email arrived from an untraceable sender, so the message was short. Wat Phra Anarat Chiang Rai full moon. Attached was a blurry image of a wooden gate under a carved serpent arch. In the center of the gate was a red seal, circular, drawn by hand with streaks of gold that shimmered even through the pixelation. Arun thought it was staged, maybe part of an underground ritual scam, but something about that photo bothered him. It looked old, older than the camera that had captured it. He told himself he would investigate, expose the trick, and maybe turn the footage into his next big project, an honest look at the psychology of belief. That was how he justified it to himself. But deep down, he knew he was chasing the same thing that had driven every skeptic before him, proof that fear could be filmed and explained. So, one humid evening, he packed his gear, a compact cinema camera, backup batteries, wireless mics, his laptop, and a charm from his mother he didn't believe in, but couldn't leave behind. He drove through the night, following paper directions from the email, because GPS lost signal halfway up the range. Around midnight, the asphalt ended, replaced by dirt the color of dried blood. The jungle pressed close on both sides, its silence thick. When he finally stopped, his headlights caught something pale through the Mista wooden gate. Just like in the photograph, the serpent's carved body coiling over the arch. The seal glimmered faintly in the moonlight. He stepped out of the car, expecting insects, the hum of night, maybe wind. There was nothing. The air was perfectly still, as if holding its breath. Then, from somewhere beyond the gate, a bell rang 3 times. Arun swallowed hard. The sound wasn't an echo, it was a pulse. The skeptic's arrival, Arun stayed still, one hand on the hood of his car, the other clutching his camera bag. The third bell strike had faded, but the vibration lingered in his chest, like the last tremor of a drum. The fog around him shifted slightly, curling through the beam of his headlights, revealing what the photograph had: T2 wooden posts on either side of the gate, carved with hundreds of small inscriptions, each one blackened at the edges. They looked burned into the wood rather than carved, as if someone had written prayers with a heated blade. He took a step closer and lifted his camera, then hesitated. He wasn't afraid exactly. It was something quieter than that, like being caught staring at a sleeping animal. Then he saw movement, a faint orange glow deeper down the path. For a second, he thought it was a lantern. But the light didn't move like flame, flickered too rhythmically, too deliberate. The air smelled faintly metallic, almost electrical. He turned off his car lights and stood in darkness. The glow brightened, then dimmed, then vanished. Behind him, gravel shifted. A voice spoke quietly in Thai, low and even. Shouldn't have come here. Arun spun around. A monk stood just beyond the fog line, his robe the color of wet earth, his expression neither welcoming nor hostile. He was barefoot, his feet streaked with dust, his posture calm in a way that only came from repetition. "I'm looking for Wat Freya Anarat," Arun said, forcing his tone to sound confident. "I'm making a documentary about ancient mountain rituals." "I was told you were told wrong," the monk interrupted. "This place isn't for stories." Arun took a breath. I don't want to offend anyone. I only want to understand." The monk's gaze moved past him to the gate. "Understanding isn't the same as seeing," he said. "And seeing isn't always harmless." Arun tried to read his tone, but it was flat, measured, as if he were reciting something memorized long ago. "I've come a long way," Arun said finally. "If you'd just let me observe, no recording, no questions. I only want to see what happens tonight." The monk was silent for a long moment, the mist curling around him like breath. Then he nodded once. "You may watch, but you must obey. No light, no sound, no words after the third chant. Whatever you hear from behind the inner door, you will not look. Do you understand?" Arun nodded. "Yes." The monk studied him for a beat longer, then turned and touched the seal at the center of the gate. The red clay softened under his fingers like wax, and the door opened with a slow sigh. Cool air rushed out, carrying the scent of incense and something else, something faintly metallic, like old blood. Arun hesitated at the threshold. The monk gestured for him to follow. "I am Pra Anorat," he said. "Remember my name when you are afraid." The path beyond the gate was narrow, lined with small shrines buried under vines. As they walked, the fog grew thicker, and the night sounds of the jungle faded until even their footsteps seemed muffled. After what felt like 20 minutes, they reached a clearing. The temple stood a head low, wooden roof curved and blackened with age. Dozens of paper lanterns hung along the eaves, their light dim and unsteady. A circle of monks sat in the courtyard, cross-legged, each with a thin white cord tied around one wrist. The cords connecting them in a continuous loop that led into the main hall. The sight made something in Arun's chest tighten. The cords looked less like symbols of unity and more like bindings. He reached instinctively for his camera, then stopped. "Pra." Anorat's voice came low beside him. "He said you would only watch." Arun nodded, letting the strap fall back against his shoulder. "What is this ceremony?" "A reminder," said the monk. "For us, and for what sleeps beneath." Arun frowned. "Beneath?" Pra Anorat didn't answer. His gaze fixed on the temple door thick, ancient wood painted with faded red script. It pulsed faintly, almost imperceptibly, as if something behind it was breathing. Arun followed his eyes, and without realizing it, took a step closer. That was when he felt it, the faintest vibration under his feet, a heartbeat too slow to be human. He looked up at the moon. It was full and heavy, and for a moment he could swear it was pulsing in time with the rhythm beneath the ground. Pra Anorat's voice broke the silence. "Now you'll see why we don't invite the world here," the chanting began. Dung, Bon Si, Muon Tivit Tip Part 3. The Hidden Ritual Kang. The hidden ritual, the chanting, began softly, low and rhythmic, a sound that seemed to crawl out of the ground rather than rise into the air. 12 monks sat in a perfect circle before the temple's main door, their bodies perfectly still, their voices blending into one endless drone. The cords around their wrists trembled faintly, as if carrying an invisible current. The air was colder here. The mist that had followed Arun up the mountain now clung to the ground, swirling in thin streams around the circle. The smell of burning herbs mixed with the sharp temps of something else, alcyone, salt, and rot. Pra Anorat stood at the edge of the ritual space, hands clasped, lips moving silently. His shadow stretched toward the temple, unnaturally long. Arun found himself drawn forward, pulled not by curiosity, but by something heavier, like gravity. Each note of the chant pressed against his chest, deep and vibrating. He wanted to raise his camera, to capture this sound, this impossible harmony. But he remembered the warning. No light, no sound, no words. So he just watched. The monks began to sway as one, their bodies bending in perfect rhythm, cords tightening. The circle pulsed like a living organism, breathing in and out, the sound rising to a strange metallic pitch. Then, a deep rumble answered from behind the temple door. It was not thunder, it came from the earth itself, a vibration that shook the wooden beams and sent ripples through the lantern light. The chanting grew faster, louder, almost desperate. Arun's pulse quickened. He looked at Pra Eneret, but the monk's eyes were closed, his expression unreadable. Then came the sound and knock, heavy and deliberate, from inside the door. The monks did not stop. Second knock followed, then a third, each louder than the last, until the cords snapped tight, cutting into their wrists. Arun took a step back. The sound of the chanting fractured, splintered by panic. One of the younger monks broke rhythm, clutching his arm where the cord had bitten deep. His voice rose above the others, shouting a prayer Arun didn't understand. Pra Eneret moved instantly, gripping the monk's shoulder and forcing him back into rhythm. "Do not stop," he shouted, but the door moved again just a fraction. A wooden groan like something testing its chains. The air shifted. The mist that had been drifting lazily across the ground began to twist upwards, spiraling around the monks in thin white threads. Arun stared, unable to believe what he was seeing. The fog wasn't rising naturally, it was being drawn toward the cracks in the temple door, disappearing inside as if being inhaled. He felt his skin prickle. Every instinct told him to leave, yet something stronger kept him frozen. He reached slowly into his bag, fingers brushing against the cool metal of the camera. He hesitated, then drew it out and lifted it just enough to peek through the viewfinder. The lens struggled to focus in the dim light, the auto-adjustment pulsing with each flicker of the lanterns. Then it locked on. Through the lens, he saw something none of the monks could see with their naked eyes. Behind the wooden door, faintly illuminated by the shifting light, there was movement, a shadow shaped almost like a person, standing perfectly still. But where its face should have been, there was only a hollow void. Arun's breath caught. The figure tilted its head slightly as if sensing him. He pulled the camera away, heart pounding. When he looked again with his eyes, the door was closed, the mist still streaming toward it. "You looked, Pra," Eneret said quietly beside him. Arun jumped. He hadn't heard the monk approach. "What did you see?" someone Arun said. "Something, Pra." Arun's expression darkened. "It's not someone," he said. "It's what remains when someone forgets how to die." He turned back toward the circle, voice rising above the chaos. "Stay together." But it was too late. The cords were snapping one by one, the sound sharp like whips. The chanting faltered as one monk screamed, his voice echoing across the courtyard. The seal on the temple door pulsed once red, bright, alive. Then it cracked. The door opens, the first crack ran straight through the middle of the red seal like a vein of lightning. Faint hiss followed, dry and serpentine, as if the wood itself were exhaling after years of holding its breath. The monks shouted in unison, their chants colliding into chaos. Pra Eneret lunged toward the door, pressing his palms against it, shouting words that no longer sounded human. Arun felt the vibration under his feet again, stronger now, rhythmic like a second heartbeat layered over his own. The mist in the courtyard churned violently, spinning upward in tight spirals that caught the lantern light, turning it white and blinding. And the younger monk, who had broken rhythm earlier, began to convulse, his body bowing backward, mouth open in a silent scream. The white cord around his wrist burned red-hot, smoke rising where it cut his skin. Arun took an involuntary step forward, camera in hand, his instincts as a filmmaker overpowering his fear. He wanted to understand, to capture what was happening, even if every part of him screamed to run. He lifted the camera and hit record. The lens focused instantly, as if pulled toward the temple door by something unseen. Through the viewfinder, Arun saw what his eyes couldn't, to distortion in the air. Like heat rising from asphalt, except it wasn't shimmering, it was pulsing. The red seal split entirely with a dull pop, and a black mist seeped through the crack, thick and oily. It moved against gravity, curling upward before spreading outward like smoke from a dying fire. The monks screamed louder, their voices cracking, their chants dissolving into fragmented syllables. Pra Eneret shouted at them to keep praying, but one by one they faltered, clutching their chests, coughing as the black mist reached them. Arun stepped back, his camera still fixed on the door. In the footage, the mist wasn't black. It was alive with shapes. Hundreds of shadowy faces forming and fading in seconds. He blinked, looked up with his eyes, and saw only darkness. He lowered the camera again this time, as one of those faces was staring back through the lens, pressed against the inside of the glass, smiling. Arun gasped and dropped the camera. It hit the ground, but didn't stop recording. The display showed static for a moment, then refocused. The door was open now, just enough to see a sliver of the darkness beyond. A wind burst from inside, carrying with it the stench of rot and iron. The lanterns exploded in a wave, plunging the courtyard into near darkness. Arun shielded his eyes as Anarat screamed, "Do not look into the door." But Arun had already looked. What he saw didn't make sense. The interior of the temple was vast, impossibly so, like a tunnel carved into the night itself. And deep within that tunnel, something moved. Not walking, not crawling, flowing. It slithered forward like a river of shadows, twisting and undulating until it reached the threshold. The temperature dropped instantly, his breath turning to fog. Anarat pressed his body against the door, chanting through clenched teeth, his voice cracking. "Back to your place," he shouted. "You are not welcome here." The darkness stopped for a heartbeat. Then it pushed. The door slammed open, throwing Anarat backward. Arun stumbled, falling hard onto his side, his hand brushing the camera again. The lens caught everything, the monks scattering, the mist collapsing inward, the black shape pouring out like ink in water. For a moment there was no sound, only the deep, wet hiss of something breathing through a mouth that didn't need air. Then it came forward, long-armed to thin, jointed reached into the courtyard. The fingers ended in black, translucent tips that moved like smoke. One monk tried to run, but before he could take 3 steps, his body froze mid-motion, as if trapped between frames of a film. His skin darkened from within, veins glowing faintly red. He turned his head slowly toward Arun, and for an instant his eyes were empty sockets filled with ash. Then he crumbled, his body collapsing into a heap of dust that vanished into the mist. Arun screamed. The sound tore through the courtyard, cutting through the chant. Anarat crawled toward him, his face pale. "Stop recording," he shouted. "It's seeing through your lens." But Arun couldn't move. On the screen, the thing was no longer just outside the door, it was inside the camera, its form shifting closer with every flicker of static. He stared, frozen, as it reached out of the frame. The shadow touched his wrist, and the cold burned deeper than fire. The possession of the lens, Arun's scream caught in his throat as the cold spread from his wrist to his shoulder, numbing his arm in seconds. The camera trembled in his grip, humming softly like a living thing. Wanted to throw it away, but his fingers wouldn't obey. They locked around the handle, the tendons pulling tight as though the metal had fused to his skin. The screen flickered violently, cycling between static and images his own face. The monks, the temple door, and then something else. A face that wasn't his. A reflection that smiled even when he didn't. Anarat dragged himself toward him, his robe torn, his breathing ragged. "Drop it," he yelled. Now, Arun tried again, but his body wasn't his anymore. His eyes rolled back for a moment as a whisper crawled into his ear, not from the air, but from inside his skull. It spoke in Thai, slow and melodic. "You watched me? Now, I will see through you." The moment the words ended, the camera went still. Arun gasped, jerking back as if waking from drowning. His wrist was blackened where the shadow had touched him, veins glowing faintly beneath the skin. The monks who had survived were huddled near the far end of the courtyard, chanting frantically. The black mist was everywhere now, crawling up the pillars and swirling above the roof like a living storm. Anarat stood, clutching a talisman that burned faintly gold in his hand. He began to chant louder, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "Return to darkness. You have no place among the living." The shadows shuddered, retreating for a moment as though the sound itself pained them. Arun staggered to his feet, still clutching the camera, and pointed it toward the temple. Through the lens, the world looked different. Black mist was no longer just smoke. It had form, shape, intent. Dozens of faces swam within it, screaming silently, pressing against each other as if trapped under glass. And at the center of it all, a shape began to form. It was tall and thin, its limbs unnaturally long, its skin translucent like wet paper. Its head tilted at an impossible angle, and when it moved, it didn't walk, it bent space around it. Arun's heart pounded. The thing turned toward him. It didn't have eyes, but he felt its gaze. A pressure in his chest, so heavy he could barely breathe. The camera lens cracked, a thin spiderweb line spreading across the glass. Through it, the creature appeared closer, clearer, as if the fracture had opened a passage. Arun stumbled back, his heel catching on loose gravel. "Pra Anarat," he shouted. "What is it?" The monk's face was grim. "It's what the temple was built to contain. You've given it a mirror? A mirror? Way out?" Pra Anarat gripped the talisman tighter and pressed it to Arun's hand. The gold burned against his skin, searing the black veins. Arun screamed, the pain white-hot, but the numbness receded slightly. "Listen to me," the monk said. "It's inside the image now. As long as it's being watched, it can move. If anyone sees this recording, it will cross again." Arun looked at the camera, the lens still cracked and glowing faintly. "Then I'll destroy it." "No," the monk said. "Can't. It's already duplicated. It lives in memory, now in reflections. In anything that holds light, the ground beneath them trembled, dust falling from the eaves." One of the remaining monks cried out as the black mist surged forward again, swallowing the courtyard in a wave. Pra Anarat shoved Arun backward, shouting a final command. "Run to the gate. Don't look back." Arun hesitated. "What about you?" The monk turned, his eyes fierce. "I'll hold it as long as I can. Go." Arun ran, the camera still clutched in his burning hand. The path to the gate was longer than before, stretching like a nightmare that refused to end. Behind him, he heard the monks screaming, the sound of the chant breaking apart into chaos. And then the dull crash of the temple doors slamming shut once more. The mountain went silent. When Arun reached the gate, he turned briefly, despite the warning. The temple courtyard glowed faintly in the distance, the fog pulsing red from within. Then the seal reappeared, new, unbroken, as if none of it had ever happened. Arun collapsed beside his car, shaking, gasping for air. The camera was still in his lap, the screen blank. For a moment, he thought it was finally over. Then the display flickered to life. His own face stared back at him, but the eyes weren't his. They were hollow, shifting pools of shadow. And somewhere inside the speaker, a faint whisper laughed. The haunting of the screen, the laughter was soft, at first distant, as if it came from beneath the earth, but it grew clearer with every amade, passing second threading itself through the static of the speaker until it became a breath against Ern's ear. He dropped the camera, scrambling backward on the gravel. The screen stayed lit, his reflection still staring up from the cracked glass, smiling faintly. "You carried me out," the voice whispered, distorted but unmistakable. "Now I will see the world again." Arun staggered to his feet, heart pounding. He looked toward the temple. The gate was closed, silent, unmoving. Nothing in the forest stirred. Yet the air was wrong, too heavy, too still. His instinct screamed at him to leave. But something inside him, that stubborn hunger for proof, demanded one last shot, one final record of what he had witnessed. He picked up the camera with trembling hands and checked the footage. The screen flickered between static and fragments of the ceremony. The monks chanting, the seal cracking, the darkness flooding through the door. Then it froze on a single frame. Pra Anarat staring straight into the lens, mouth open in a silent warning. Arun scrubbed forward, but the video glitched. No matter where he skipped, the frame stayed the same. The monk's eyes locked on his. Then, over the image, new footage appeared, his own face, recorded from a low angle, though he had never set the camera there. His reflection began to move on its own, smiling wider. He dropped the device again, this time letting it fall hard enough to shatter the corner of the casing. The light went out. Silence. Only the sound of the forest returning, the faint buzz of insects, the whisper of leaves. Arun forced himself to breathe, picked up the camera, and shoved it into his bag. He drove down the mountain without headlights, too afraid of what he might see reflected in the windshield. The road was longer now, winding endlessly, fog pressing against the glass like living hands. Every so often the engine stuttered, the dashboard lights flickering. The faint glow of the camera's standby light blinked inside the bag on the passenger seat. At some point, exhaustion took over. He didn't remember falling asleep, only waking to find the sun rising over the river and his car parked in front of a cheap guest house. For a moment, he almost convinced himself it had been a dream. But when he opened the bag, the camera was gone. Only his laptop remained, the lid slightly open. The screen was on, showing the same frozen image of Pra Anarat's face. Arun's pulse quickened, tried to shut it, but the hinge resisted. The image began to move, pixel by pixel, as if being rebuilt from inside the machine. The monk's mouth opened wider. Then came the whisper, this time from the laptop's speakers, low and broken. "You brought it here?" Arun slammed the lid shut, but the whisper continued, muffled beneath the casing. He yanked the battery out, but the screen stayed faintly lit, the glow seeping through the cracks. In the silence that followed, the hotel's air felt charged, thick with static. A maid knocked once on the door, asking if he was all right. He didn't answer. He couldn't. The moment she left, he grabbed the laptop, shoved it into his bag, and ran for the car. The whispering grew louder, overlapping voices and languages he didn't recognize. He drove for hours, following the highway south toward Bangkok. But no matter how far he went, the voices stayed with him, faint at first, then stronger, echoing through the radio even when it was off. By dusk, the world outside his windows had turned red with the dying light, and the reflection in the rearview mirror no longer matched his own movements. When he turned his head, the reflection stayed, grinning. He tore the mirror off and threw it out the window. The whispering stopped. For a moment, there was silence. Then, from the laptop bag, came the sound of a bell ringing 3 times. The return of the shadow, the ringing echoed inside the car, dull but deliberate, each toll reverberating through the metal frame. Arun slammed the brakes, his tires screeching against the asphalt. The highway was empty, the horizon painted with the last bleeding color of sunset. The air hung still as if time itself had paused to listen. He sat frozen behind the wheel, staring at the bag in the passenger seat where the sound had come from. The third bell faded, leaving only the faint hum of the engine. He waited. Nothing. Finally, with hands shaking, he reached for the zipper. The bag was unnaturally cold, the kind of chill that had weight to it, like air that had never seen the sun. He pulled the laptop out slowly. The screen was cracked now, spiderweb lines running through the glass, but the machine was on. He hadn't touched the power button. For a moment, only static filled the display. Then the image sharpened into something he recognized all too well: the temple courtyard. The monk's circle, the broken seal. The footage had restarted on its own. Arun tried to close the lid, but the hinge wouldn't move. It was as if the computer were resisting him. The chanting began again through the speakers, soft and rhythmic, the same melody that had filled the mountain air. Then, faintly, another sound joined it, the low hiss of wind. Except it wasn't wind. The noise grew deeper, more human, like a sigh crawling up from the earth. The camera's point of view shifted slightly. Someone was holding it. Arun's stomach turned as realization sank. And he hadn't filmed this part. He hadn't even been there. The camera tilted toward the temple door, now wide open. From inside, the black mist poured out in thick ribbons, sliding across the courtyard floor. The view moved closer, trembling slightly, as if whoever held it were breathing heavily. Then, the feed froze. For a second, nothing moved. Then a face filled the frame. Not human. It was stretched and gray, with hollow sockets where eyes should be, and teeth too many to fit in its mouth. The voice that followed was a whisper turned inside out. "You watched me once," it said, "but now I am watching through you." Arun slammed the laptop shut and hurled it out of the car window. It hit the asphalt with a metallic crack, but the sound didn't stop. He'd still hear it muffled, coming from somewhere inside the vehicle, vibrating through the dashboard. He opened the glove compartment, the door panels, even the vents, trying to find the source, but there was nothing. The whisper seemed to live in the air itself. He gripped the steering wheel, sweat dripping from his hairline, and hit the gas. The car shot forward, tearing down the empty road. He drove without direction, without plan, just to put distance between himself and that sound. Hours passed. The moon climbed high, round and cold. The whisper finally faded, leaving only the drone of the tires. Exhaustion hit him like a wave. He spotted a roadside inn, its flickering sign barely legible, and pulled in. Inside, the clerk barely looked up, sliding a key across the counter. "Room 6, she murmured, her eyes fixed on something unseen. The hallway smelled of dust and stale air. Arun entered his room and locked the door twice. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at his trembling hands. His wrists still bore the faint black veins, though the glow had faded. He leaned back, trying to breathe, telling himself it was all in his head. Then the television in the corner turned on by itself. Static filled the screen, white and shifting. He stood up slowly. "No," he whispered, but the static changed. It began to form shapes movement, a figure walking toward the camera through fog. The same courtyard, the same mist. The thing from the temple was back. It turned its head slowly, and though it had no eyes, Arun felt its gaze lock on him. He stumbled backward, his shoulder hitting the wall. The voice came through the TV speaker, soft but clear. "You carried me far, Arun. You gave me light again." The image flickered now. It showed his car parked outside the motel, headlights off. Then, a close-up of the motel door. His door, someone or something was outside. The knock came once, slow, deliberate tap against the thin motel door that sounded too gentle to belong to anything alive. Arun froze. The television flickered again, showing the hallway outside. He could see the exact same door on the screen, his own. From an angle that made no sense, as if someone were holding a camera right outside, filming in real time. His stomach turned cold. "Who's there?" called, voice trembling. No reply, only the hum of static and the faint, uneven rhythm of breathing coming from the speakers. The image on the television trembled slightly, the camera angle swaying closer now to the door handle. He could hear it move, metal scraping against wood. Panic surged through him. Arun ran to the window and threw it open. The night outside was thick with fog, the air heavy with the smell of rain. The parking lot was empty except for his car. For a split second, he considered jumping, but the room was on the second floor. Something deep in his chest told him that whatever waited outside might already be everywhere. He turned back toward the television just as the doorknob began to turn, slowly, too slowly. The screen showed the same movement in perfect synchronization, frame by frame, until both the real and the reflected door creaked open together. The hallway beyond was empty. The lights flickered once, then died. Arun's breath came in ragged bursts. He stepped backward toward the far wall, his hand fumbling for anything to defend himself. The TV screen brightened, flooding the dark room with a cold, pale glow. From the speakers, the voice returned, no longer whispering, but calm, almost tender. "You opened the gate for me once," it said. "Now, I'll open one for you." The image on the screen shifted again. It was no longer the hallway. It was the temple, the serpent gate, the red seal freshly drawn, the mist swirling behind it. The camera seemed to move through the door as if passing into another world. Arun felt the pressure change in the room, air rushing inward. The fog outside the window thickened, pressing against the glass like hands. The mirror above the dresser began to vibrate softly, the reflection blurring. "No," Arun whispered. "You can't have me." He grabbed the television and yanked the plug from the wall, but the screen stayed lit, the light pulsing brighter. The images were changing faster now. His car, the mountain road, Pra Anarat's face, the monks, the cracked seal, then himself, standing in the motel room staring into the screen. The reflection blinked before he did. Slowly it began to move toward the front of the frame, its hand reaching out until it pressed against the inside of the glass. The surface rippled like water. The lights flickered again, then burst. Darkness swallowed everything except the glow of the TV. The hand pushed through the screen. First the fingers, then the wrist, then the arm black. Fluid, glistening like oil. The voice was everywhere now, inside the walls, inside his skull. "You wanted to see." Arun stumbled backward, knocking over the nightstand. The reflection pulled itself free from the television, unfolding into the room. Its body was thin and angular, its skin translucent, showing shadows moving beneath. It had no face, only a smooth expanse of gray where features should be, yet its expression was unmistakably human. He was smiling. Arun lunged for the window, trying to shove it open wider. The frame jammed halfway, the damp wood swollen from the rain. Behind him, the creature moved closer, its movements jerky at first, then fluid, almost graceful. The temperature dropped sharply. His breath fogged the air. "You showed them the darkness," the voice said. You gave me their eyes. Arun turned, grabbing the bedside lamp and swung. The light shattered across the creature's chest, sparks scattering like fireflies. The thing didn't flinch. Instead, it reached forward, its hand pressing over Arun's chest. The world blurred. Images flooded his mind in rapid flashes: the temple, the cracked seal, the camera lens shattering, the monk's final words. As long as it's being watched, it can move. In that instant, he understood. The thing didn't just need to be filmed. It needed to be seen. It lived in the act of observation, in the gaze itself. Every viewer, every lens, every reflection, it could step through all of them. Arun screamed and slammed himself backward against the window. The glass broke, and cold air rushed in. For a heartbeat, the world froze, the creature standing over him, its shadow stretching across the wall. Then the image on the TV changed one final time, showed the same room, now empty. The window opened, the fog drifting inside. The static faded. The screen went black. No one ever saw Arun again. Weeks later, the motel manager reported the abandoned room. Police found his belongings still there: a cracked laptop, a burned camera, and a broken television whose screen refused to stay dark. When they unplugged it, the image would fade for a few seconds, then return, faint, but visible. A man standing in the fog, looking out as if waiting to be seen. If you've watched this far, tell me what you believe happened to him. Was it punishment for curiosity, or proof that some things truly live through sight itself? Leave your thoughts below, because stories like this only stay alive when someone dares to look.